Everybody, welcome to, I think we can call this the first official edition of Magpie Tales. We did record a couple of these, I think, last year, 2 years ago, but we'll call those pilot episodes. This is the first main one, and it's going to be an absolute cracker. We're going to be talking, obviously, about the state of Dereham town at the moment, given where we are with the coronavirus pandemic, and it goes without saying, if you've got any questions for my guest this evening, which is Chairman Ashley Bunn and Treasurer Ben Dack, then do get them in, and I'll put them to the guys over the course of however long we go for. Ash, let's start with you first and foremost. How are you doing? It's obviously an incredibly difficult period of time for everyone. More so, I think, non-league clubs at this moment in time, because obviously, I suppose similarly with a lot of other businesses, they're kind of this difficult period where they don't know when things are going to kick-started again, or if they're going to get kick-started again this season. So how has that been from your perspective, sort of navigating through the last, whatever it's been, 3-4 months of this season?
Yeah, really tough. If you look at going into the autumn, I think we just sort of come back, had some games, and then there's that indecision again. We voted previously in terms of whether we were going to play or not. We were quite shocked that so many clubs chose not to play when we could. We were ready to go and set up, and we thought we were COVID safe and sort of crack on whilst we could. Obviously then got stopped again, and we're now in the same situation where, we've voted again. The league are putting it forward to the FA Council, so we're now waiting for essentially what I guess is confirmation that the season's going to be ended and null and void. But yeah, completely right. It's really tough, and that indecision is the bit that's the killer. We're almost waiting now to have that confirmation, then we can plan again. So yeah, tough, mate.
I know, obviously, as I said, for businesses generally, it's difficult to prepare for anything or adapt at this moment in time, given that we don't know what's sort of down the line in a week or a month or even 3. Is that any different? I suppose this is probably a question for both of you. Is that any different at all for a football club? Is the preparation any different to say, because you guys are obviously both involved in different businesses as well outside of football? Is there a big difference between preparing a football club and getting a football club through as to getting through what you class as maybe a conventional business?
Not for me, really. I think there's a few variables, but from the outset, when it first, almost a year ago, we went into crisis management, as we said, and it was literally kind of about survival. And the one message we've tried to put out is that we want to come out of this better than we went into it, which sounds an odd thing to say, but what it's given us, which we're all short of, is time. So we've kind of gone back to the drawing board. People like Ben and that have come in, and it's allowed us to have the right people around the table to plan and attack it. So there's various things that we worked on throughout the football club during this period. But it's the same principle. We're looking at the same periods ahead. We're trying to manage and budget and forecast, which I'm sure Ben will talk kind of more of. We're trying to improve where we can. Certain facility improvements and stuff we've done during this period. And we tried to work more so with the community again and those community groups and make the community a better place during this period. So, it's no different for me. It's exactly the same, just different challenges and different variables.
Yeah, and same for me as well, Connor, because, like you say, in terms of my other role outside of Dereham, the principles are the same. It's just a case of the quants and such which change within that. It's a position where you've got to kind of go back to the drawing board, look at what's in, critical, what's crisis, what you need to then kind of change. And the problem we've then had is, particularly with Dereham, the league, in terms of these stop-startings, it's really cost-intensive to kind of keep starting and keep stopping it, keep starting. It's to Ash's, what Ash has already said, it's kind of more effective to kind of say, just make one decision of the whole season, and actually then just reset yourself, then kind of come back and more prepared. In similar as well with business in terms of the economy at the minute. It's just a case of every time we have these lockdowns and kind of go in, we come out and not knowing where we're going to be the next week, it costs and hemorrhages money for a lot of businesses. And that is real world, and that you can say the same thing for football. So it's quite challenging but rewarding at the same time. So it gives you that opportunity to then actually question the way you do things as well. So, and me being quite a pro changer, should we say, it's kind of been right up my sort of street to kind of go in and question that. So
does that, like I guess what you said there in terms of not having a definitive decision, and hopefully we're closer to that than maybe we were in December when the decision was made, but does that make it more challenging because essentially you're planning for different scenarios and you're planning, well, if A happens or if B happens, whereas if there was a straight decision, let's say, for example, if they null and voided the season in December, then you would know at least what you were sort of working with for the next 6 months or so.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about scenario planning at the minute, for Dereham, for businesses, everyone. I'm sure, I don't know many people in similar roles to myself where you're not scenario planning. You are basing it on another lockdown, another kind of, if we try and restart the season at Dereham, that you always got these kind of scenarios to kind of work through in terms of what the costs be, what's the setup, how does that then look, and what cash is required. That's what it all boils down to at the end of the day.
Ash, how's this period been for you? Obviously, leading a group of people in your role, has it been quite difficult? Because as we've kind of touched upon, there hasn't been, unlike other things, perhaps a definitive route out of it or a definitive date that you can give to people when this will change. It's the uncertainty which makes it so difficult, I suppose.
Yeah, completely. And it has been tough. And again, I think it sounds an odd thing to say, but it's almost like we've really embraced it. With the people around the table, it has given us that time to breathe and look at culturally, create an identity. What are we as a football club? What do we stand for, and what do we want to build? The variables is not a lot we can do about. As much as we can plan scenarios, as Ben's saying, and we'll certainly do that, and we'll look at that budgeting and forecasting and what the landscape looks like for 3 months, 6 months, and all the normal things. We can't actually change it too much, and we are in that static kind of position. We can't drive attendances, we can't increase sponsorship. There's not really a lot we can do at the moment. So it's almost been quite exciting to have a bit of time to sit and plan. And as a football club, I think we're in a, we mentioned it before, but we're probably in as good a position as we could have been going into this. We don't have a huge kind of wage bill that's killing the club. We don't have huge kind of outgoings and stuff. So we're probably in as good and healthy position as we could be. And, it's trying to embrace those positives, I guess, that can come out of it. So, it's tough, but take it for what it is.
I'll ask you a bit more in terms of the specific state of the finances at the moment. But Ben, for you, has it been difficult? Has it been a difficult period to come in and try and navigate through? Because obviously you've come in through the middle of this. You weren't there, as Ash said, maybe at the start when the crisis management kicked in. Has that been difficult, or has that made it easier in many ways?
It feels like a different world, doesn't it, actually, when we were before this? But no, it's been quite good, actually, because it's given us then the time to kind of then go through everything with a fine tooth comb, really, to kind of understand what's urgent, what we need to look at. It's given us that kind of offline time, should we say, to go and have a look at things behind the scenes, which ordinarily through a season you probably wouldn't have as much time to kind of go and do that. So if there's any upside to kind of this whole lockdown piece and time, that actually we've had more time to kind of go through that and spend some quality of time understanding what we need to do going forward. So
I know, obviously, in the role I do day to day, dealing with Norwich, that a lot of the time spent during the first lockdown, when obviously professional football was shut down as well, a lot of their time, and it kind of points to what you were saying, Ash, in terms of how they used their time, was spent on recruitment and looking at options for players in the summer and long-term planning, etc. So just give us a little bit of an idea of maybe what the long-term planning you guys are doing. That's probably a question for both of you, really, but just to make sure the football club comes out of this in whenever this ends, and we hope it's sooner rather than later, but to make sure that it does come out in a viable position, I guess, financially.
Yeah, so from my point, I think there's been two kind of splits to this. One was one was the survival element, in terms of we had to put the football club first, so we've got to survive. And that's where kind of Ben came in, and we started looking at that forecasting and cash flow and budgeting through. And luckily there has been elements from Sport England, and now you've got the winter survival package through the Football Foundation that has now come out, but there are avenues to manage those costs, I guess, and the same as the furlough scheme or elements like that. So, that's the first part for us over there. The other part is that long-term growth. I think we've said many times before as well that COVID kind of came in at a real bad time for us, as it did for everyone, but we were then sort of really kicking off and going with, we've got the media lads in, we had all of these things sort of moving forward, and it put a bit of a halt to that. So for us, in terms of the long-term plans, we want, I mentioned it a few times before, again, in terms of culture, identity, it's really important for us to get that into the football club, which is why, the media lads coming in was so key to that. So we've got loads of branding work and stuff around the ground that we're doing. Even in the short term, just some floodlights are fixed. I'm sure people listening, all the fans will be pleased because they've been out for ages. It's not good enough. Floodlights are fixed, car park lights are fixed. We're working closer with the youth, and we've got some sort of deeper plans with that. to make sure that kind of seamlessly links as one football club and to work with them. We're doing loads with the council and the community and community groups to make sure we're delivering a better experience for the people in the local community, with us than without us. And that's the bit for us. It's hard to build any momentum, so a lot of it is just planning and getting that structural kind of element in place. There's a lot of fan engagement stuff that we're looking at. As we said before, BT Sport and stuff. There's a whole model going on. So we're waiting to kind of cling to that date, and we've been given the 14th of August as a start date for our season. I think it was just a bit of positivity, potentially more than anything, but it's certainly kind of a bit of a kind of line on that horizon that we're aiming for. And as soon as we get this confirmation, we'll be able to kick on. But there's lots of plans, and we've got some really good people. We keep saying it. Whether that's Ben coming in, we've got other Ben as secretary, and that communication for us has been really strong via Zoom and Teams, and the same as every other business is doing to make sure we're joining up. So, Ben Williamson had the league AGM the other week, so he's feeding through that. Any grants or anything that's available, we're jumping all over and making the most of that. So, there's a long way around it, Connor, but there was two elements. One, how do we survive and how do we make sure that happens? I'm more than confident we're in a good place now, and we'll see that through. The next bit is how do we build and create that long-term plan, which we've got the right people around the table looking at 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, it's about that. Yeah, like Ash says, it's about that splitting it into the short term, getting through this COVID and then pandemic, and then the long term, and kind of what our vision looks like, what is our strategy piece, and the various strands which then feed into that. Obviously, we kind of need to then get the short term piece done first, kind of understanding where that will stop us at the end of that. Like Ash says, you can draw a line in the sense of being the start of the new season, and then from there then goes into the long term kind of scenario. Okay, what does that then look like in terms of what do we want, what's the vision, what's the culture then it's based on. So it's kind of, we had to prepare the immediate fires, obviously, kind of understand what we were going to do to start getting through this part, and then once we know what that future looks like, then we can kind of just build on that. So
Interesting. In terms of the financial state of the club, perhaps in a bit more depth, how would you assess it at the moment? Because there's obviously some, I would say very few, maybe non-league clubs would run themselves in the way that Dereham do. Has that strangely given you guys a little bit of a benefit over perhaps other sides that do have, as you said, Ash, perhaps big wage bills and will really struggle to come through this period?
I think so. From my personal view, I think so. We've essentially gone into lockdown. All of the income stopped, as we said before, and we've minimised those outgoings. So all the players, staff, to an extent, are furloughed, or as far along as we could get away with, to allow us to still operate. Suspended accounts and outgoings where we can. Until recently, the college and the academy was obviously still running, so there was an income stream there. So for us, we've pretty much gone into lockdown. So, there's not a huge kind of deficit and surplus other than the kind of utilities and things like that you'd think of. But again, as we said, Sport England covered that before. We're now got the Football Foundation, which is going to cover that again. So, for us, I'm hopeful that we're going to come through it and come out of it potentially kind of stronger than we went into it. And again, in terms of those models, as you said, Connor, we don't have a huge playing budget, and nor would we. It's not the model of our football club. It's about producing our own and developing players. And, you can see that kind of with the side that we put out on the weekend. We don't have one main sponsor or one main person financing the club. So again, what we have is lots of little sponsors, which again is a good strength at the moment. So I think even when we come out of this, the other side, I think we'll be in an even stronger position, because I think, we'll harness and work on those relationships further, rather than having, 20, 30 grand or whatever that may be from one sponsor that might be struggling, because it's going to be tough times for everyone. So I think actually, and again, I'm sure Ben will lead into it more, but our financial model probably has protected us, during this as much as anything could have.
Yeah, I had to say, Connor, coming into Dereham, you have these kind of ideas of obviously non-league football clubs, how they're run. There is a stigma around that, as I'm sure we all know. But so coming into Dereham, obviously meeting Ash, and kind of I knew they'd be well run anyway, but actually just to the nth degree that actually Ash run this, that all the finances are all tidy. It's just a really well run ship. Actually, when I joined, we knew where we were at. We knew what the cash position was going to look like. Obviously, we didn't know what the pandemic was going to turn out like as it has. But having that really nice clear starting point then meant that actually, in terms of forecasting cash, knowing where we're going to stand 6-12 months down the line, it's actually quite straightforward. Ash has done a lot of work behind the scenes, getting all the sponsorship, like sorry, in terms of getting all the income ready and then the costs. But actually, in terms of us being in a lockdown position, it's crazy to think, but actually in a lockdown position, it's much more kind of effective for our kind of modelling in terms of where we know we're going to be. Like I say, every time we try and restart things, it just takes costs and cash to kind of get there. And we don't know what attendance is going to be like. We don't know what our income's going to look like. So whereas actually, if we're locked down, we're locked down. We know what that cash is going to look like at the end of the few months' time, sort of thing. And yeah, the council's been really supportive. Our stakeholders have been really supportive. The committee's been really supportive in terms of what we're doing. So we've been able to kind of help and look at our suppliers and that, and kind of work with them to work where we needed to kind of help those outgoings. So yeah, it's been really well run, actually, I have to say. I know he's online anyway, and just to kind of but no, it's been really well run.
Yeah, that's good. That's good to hear, and I guess that's kind of the overarching positive message of our conversation tonight, is that, as you said there, in terms of 6 to 12 months or whatever, or however long we have to endure the current restrictions that is on everyone's lives, when those eventually are lifted, Dereham Town fans will have a football club to come and watch, which ultimately is the main thing, because it serves such an important part to the community.
Absolutely. And I don't think from my point, I think it's important. We had a meeting the other week, and it's important to recognise perhaps how far we've come during this time as well. So even down to the new academy buildings that are in place. So there's now a long-term plan and a new agreement there. As we said, the structure around the committee is there. I've mentioned a few other little bits earlier. So there'll certainly be a football club without a shadow of a doubt, and I'm confident it'll be a healthier and more sustainable football club to move forward. And I think that's the exciting element. And there are clubs that are going to struggle, and they'll have very different models, as we've said before. So for us, it's difficult because it's never a positive. But a lot of that foundation work and around the academy, there'll be a lot more kind of things that we're now working on to come out of that. And what we have done is built those relationships. So we're in a much healthier position in the community. So, as Ben mentioned, whether that's the, Breckland Council, the Town Council, community groups, the Education Trust through DESA and the academy, or sponsors, or, any of that angle, we worked really hard on that. So, I'm hoping that will kind of come through to fruition as well when we come out of this the other side.
I don't know if Ben wants to pick up on that, but
yeah, no, it's just it's just kind of like what Ash said in terms of knowing we're going to be in 6 to 12 months time. It even helps us kind of prepare for the next season, rather than having this kind of noise in the background about what's going to happen for the remainder of this season. Actually, just scratch it and just start again. So our line in the sand is now going to be the 14th of August. That's fine. We can kind of prepare towards that date. It makes it a lot easier for us, kind of in terms of our planning and what we're going to do, rather than try and pick up pieces of what happens for this season. So
is that easier for the guys on the football side, Gus, Ollie, to prepare for, I don't know, whatever their team is going to look like, changes they want to make, progression on the pitch that they may feel they need for next season? Does it help in that regard as well?
Yeah, I think so. When we went into was it November mini lockdown and we stopped playing, if you remember, there was that lovely time when we were the only side in Norfolk that weren't allowed to play for whatever reason that we were dragging around. I think we had 2 weeks of friendlies, and it just weren't working, and Gus and Ollie scrapped it because it was pointless. There was no time frame. There was no lead in. It weren't about match fitness. It weren't about patterns of play. It was about nothing. It was just because we had a free Saturday or a Tuesday almost. So actually, when that next lockdown came, as Ben keeps saying, it almost helped. So now back to basics, and again, the next one will come. If we now get a confirmation of the season ended and it being null and void, again, Gus and Ollie are already working on that squad for next season, and it'll just be a case of putting that into play. The contracts that we got signed, which is very few as a football club, really. It's not the model we go down, but the contracts that we have signed last year were all 12 months with a further option of another year. So again, the foundations are there for us as a football club in terms of our contracted players, and Gus and Ollie will be working on kind of additions to that squad as we move forward.
This is a question for you both, really. It's probably more opinion based than maybe fact, but is there part of you both being guys that are involved with a non-league football club that fears for the state of non-league football at the moment? There's obviously a lot of noise perhaps higher up the pyramid with the National League in the last couple of weeks. do you fear for the overall state of what non-league football is going to look like when we do finally emerge from this crisis?
My personal view is, I think I said before last time, I might have been chatting with Ben, that I would hope that it's almost a chance for non-league to reset. We've been really strong in terms of our model, and I think we're driven by the academy in terms of whether that's the payment of players or contracts or any of that structure about how our football club is run. We couldn't be any clearer with that. I think other clubs in non-league, you'll see them throwing money around. And generally, I'd say, kind of to what plan are they living to? Where are they trying to get to? And at some point, that's got to be finite. You can't just keep funding and funding and funding and funding. It's got to end somewhere. So I think some clubs potentially will struggle. But in the hope of non-league football, for me, it's you don't need that massive finance bed. For me, it's about having that model and that structure. So it's the same as any other business. And again, Ben's going to touch on this more, I'm sure. If you're living beyond your means and you've got more going out of the club than coming in, unless you're financed by somebody that's just willing to stump up that bill, and you'll even see it in the Premier League with the massive clubs, they walk away and they're no longer willing to do that, you're in trouble. Where we're not in that model. And I think there's many other good clubs that will come through this in terms of the kind of the healthy element or the healthiness of it long term. I think is about whether those other clubs reset or whether they just go again. And, I certainly hope that they reset and look at what they stand for personally.
Yeah, I think, Connor, as well. I think, like I said earlier, there's a stigma around non-league clubs and how they run. I suppose I'm kind of hopeful that a lot of people would just kind of take what this pandemic's kind of given us as an opportunity to kind of change that stigma, change it. So actually, the way that football clubs are run is more about the kind of the financial model behind it. Like Ash says, this kind of throwing money into a club is not sustainable in any club long term. Because at some point that does stop. So, and it's about kind of how we as Dereham, but any club kind of runs with cash being king. It's got to be the respected thing at the end of the day. So it's about how you forecast that and how you utilize that. So I think if anything, there'll be a short-term pain for a lot of clubs, but I'm just hopeful that actually any club just looks at their position financially in a much different light at the end of this, kind of, and learn from lessons how to run. So I'm kind of hopeful that actually when we get back into the new season, that people kind of have a bit more respect for the finances, should we say, and listen to what's going on behind the scenes. So should there be another pandemic, hopefully not, but that there'll be much more kind of well-oiled coming out the other side of that.
I think it's important, Connor, as a football club for us, and particularly non-league. There's been lots around, Norwich. Anyway, the game's nothing without fans. That can be any truer than at our level. And we've been really kind of, our business model, our plan is so people centric. So whether that's the community, fans, the people around the football club, we have no football club without that. So we've had to shift. Not that it weren't necessarily in the first place, but we've had to shift that and make that the focus. And I said it before in terms of we have to make the community a better place with us than without us. And I think that's why anyone running a non-league football club has a duty of care to that community. We're absolutely vital to what it offers. So whether that's around loneliness, we might be the only place that some people come on a Saturday and meet other people. There are so many means to it that we have to remember that. And for me, like I said, I think we do have a duty of care, and we've got to do what's right for the community and the people. And then the football club will flourish. The finances will be fine, because without them, we're nothing.
I guess the problem is that money is finite, isn't it? No matter how much of it you have, eventually it does get too much. Or, like I say, if there is an owner that's just writing a check and waving the bills away, eventually they may get bored, as has been the case with other clubs that we can example. And you're right, Ash. I've obviously been one of the very few, I say few, maybe not at the moment, but very few fortunate people to be letting Carrow Road to cover games. And I remember going to cover games at Carrow Road and then coming to Alders Park, where fans were for a short period allowed in, and the difference in terms of enjoyment was maybe due to the fact I wasn't working as well was excellent. So hopefully we get to a stage like that again very, very soon at all levels. Let's Ben, I want to talk to you a little bit about obviously your role. I think this is probably the first time we've caught up with you in terms of your role at Dereham. How have you found the first few months? It's obviously been a step back into football for you. Has it been enjoyable? Like you say, this has been a difficult period. There's not been much football played. So have you been able to take enjoyment from it?
I think for the for 3 games I was able to get towards. That was fun. But that, yeah, there's a certain part of football which is so enjoyable to kind of be part of behind the scenes as well as watching it, and being part of that kind of decision making process is actually quite fun. So yeah, my day job, working at Anglian is all it's and it's challenging, it's good, but then actually what then football then gives you as well as a kind of, we can do it weekends and have a bit of fun. It's different. It's really enjoyable. But yeah, the pandemic brought with it a lot of risk, but I think with that is kind of a lot of challenges that we can kind of just tackle. I mean, anyone who knows me knows that I do like change. So coming to Dereham, it's more of a kind of, okay, what can we change to become more leaner, tackle this head on. And yeah, Ash has been really receptive to kind of like listen to kind of what can we do to make things better for ourselves, and what the strategy is, what the vision is. There's not many people in football who have that. I don't think that I've met who've kind of had that kind of, right, what's our vision? Where are we trying to get towards? So it was really kind of great when me and Ash first met, kind of like, no, you've kind of got this sort of the mindset I'm after. So it's kind of made that kind of partnership was really good actually early on.
Was that blank canvas a key reason to why you wanted to join Dereham? The feel, I guess, that you could impact things to maybe a higher degree than possibly you would be able to at a club higher up.
Yeah, well, it's that blank canvasness in terms of the structure, how the foundations are set, but it's very much about the kind of the willing culture, the kind of willingness to kind of want to do better and drive and that growth and the appetite, the hunger for it that Ash and Gus, Ben, all the team have. I've not met many people at many clubs who have had that. So when I working in a day job and then having him at this Ash, it's like, well, it's absolutely a marriage made in heaven, really. So it sounds a bit cliche, but there you go.
Ash, obviously he's on the call, so I'll let you decide how much you want to big him up. But how good has it been to have someone with Ben's experience in football around to help navigate through this period?
Oh, it's huge, isn't it? We've pushed many times in terms of the people around the football club. So whether that's people that have been involved for 20, 30 years, they bring a certain element over here to the football club, and it's their football club, we've got to deliver for them. Whether it's people like Ben coming in, we need good people around the table. And I think from us, we're not going to get much better than Ben. So, one, we were really honoured that he took us up on kind of the offer when we approached him to get him involved. And what we have built with that kind of inner circle, and Ben was almost the final piece to that, was there's a real kind of togetherness, but a real ambition. Connor, I think we all collectively see a massive gap, if not in non-league football, in Norfolk football, that we can go and fill. And we're going to do it the right way. So, we'll make it sustainable, put the foundations in place. And we'll 100% do it kind of our way through the academy, and we'll produce players and all those things. But we're absolutely ambitious that, we will be the non-league club in Norfolk as we push forward. And we want to take it as far as we can. And you look any corner of the football club now, whether that's that inner circle kind of back house that's guiding the football club, or Gus and Ollie and the players, they're 100% is that will to improve and move on. And I think hopefully, that was one of the things for Ben. I think if we'd have just been static and surviving, I don't know necessarily whether he'd have been so appealed to come in, where, he's now that final piece to allow us to hopefully have the skill set around to take it forward.
I'm sure there are. Sorry, Ben, go on.
No, I was going to say, to Ash's point is, many clubs, so they bury their heads in the sand and just think, this is the way we do things around here and just carry on as it were. It's definitely not the case here at Dereham. So that was one of the biggest pieces where actually, no, they want to change. They want to kind of do better. They want to grow, and they've got that ambition to do that. So that was a really kind of what signed me over.
Well, I was going to ask you, because obviously for those that don't know, you obviously had a role at Norwich City, which is obviously the club in Norfolk, isn't it? Really, the biggest club in East Anglia as things stand at the moment. Just talk us a little bit about the differences in terms of perhaps the role you had there and to what you've encountered to Dereham, because I'm sure you had numerous offers maybe from professional football clubs to stay within the game. What's been the key difference to your role at Norwich to what you do at Dereham?
Yeah, so when I was at Norwich, obviously, it's quite there is elements where it's a bit of a cottage industry in the sense of there's a few clubs who kind of asked me what I was up to, kind of, what do you ever think about leaving Norwich? to be honest, I like living in Norfolk. It was always the kind of, I thought, well, actually, Norfolk's a nice place to be. I kind of quite settled here in some respects. But so it's kind of have that kind of, well, stay at Norwich for the time being and see what happens. And then I think other things came up and looked at Anglian. Obviously, they offered a quite a challenging role, which I thought, kind of takes a step away in football in some respects, but obviously then kind of look for it in a different light in terms of what Dereham was then going to offer. It's strange because in some ways, the challenges at Norwich are so similar to what we've then got at Dereham, in a sense that you are kind of having that base. One thing I did at Norwich very early on, so when I joined Norwich, it's very much a kind of case of just one cash pot for everything. So whatever you spend on players, basically everything gets spent on players, but whatever you then spend on players, you can't do anything for the infrastructure, you can't do anything for anything behind the scenes commercially. Whereas when I joined, one of the first things I did was kind of just split that budget into two. So you then had the overarching kind of player trading and them sort of elements, but you then had a football business and then a non-football business, and then you kind of then run the three elements in themselves. And then obviously then whatever you could then put into player training went forward that way. Again, similar sort of setup with Dereham in the sense of that is how we do run it, in the sense of you've got the commerciality, you've got the maximising the sponsorship incomes, which then goes into the football side and into the football business, and then subsequently into player trading. I think, well, I'm sure everyone knows in terms of how football businesses are run, it's everything should be spent on the pitch, and that doesn't really always work, as we all know. And like you said as well, Connor, that's great to keep doing that, every year, but there comes a point when you run out of money doing that, and there is a link obviously in terms of how much money there's great performance on the pitch, but there's so many other avenues to kind of go down first. One thing I was always big on is there's more marginal kind of gain sort of elements where if you've got the performance parameters and the framework right around the pitch, then the results on the pitch will just naturally benefit from that. And this is what Ash has been absolutely about, kind of getting that culture right off the pitch, getting the culture, the framework, the settings, all them sort of things right, and then from that they'll just seep into the results on the pitch. Similar to that's one thing which we when I was at Norwich, one of the biggest things was getting things right off the pitch in order to kind of then let that kind of bleed onto the pitch. And similarly we're doing the same thing at Dereham. So this underneath all that, the challenges similarly they are quite similar. Sorry, in terms of what you're looking at, but just probably the numbers are a little bit different. So in some ways makes that a little bit easier. So
well, I was going to say, you mentioned similarities there, and sort of listening to you guys speak for the last 35 minutes or so, there does seem naturally some similarities between maybe what you would have encountered at Norwich to what you have at Dereham in terms of this long-term project that there's obviously ambition to achieve, but maybe not the infinite amount of finances to make it happen. So I guess in many ways there are similarities, even though, as you say, the numbers are so different.
Yeah, and that is one thing where in football, the money does help, but there is a certain element of it where it's about the culture, about the drive, about the togetherness, really. If you've got the dressing room all together and everyone agreed in that same culture and that same belief, then the performance will come from that, and that's what Ash is all about. So,
is it easier to be a football fan in the role you currently have at Dereham than maybe it was at Norwich? I suspect that possibly is the case.
No, definitely, absolutely, definitely. When you're busy looking at different contracts of players and trying to work out what you can afford, and then the following week you slump into a really painful result, that was quite painful. So having that break has been quite enjoyable, to be honest.
Yeah, I can imagine. Ash, in terms of the league, because that isn't really what we've spoken about. Obviously, as we mentioned at the start, update on the 3rd, and you've obviously got the date for next season. I guess your inkling possibly now is that they do head down the null and void route, as we're seeing. I think a lot of clubs vote for. I mean, they're even having a vote at the moment, aren't they, at National League level about the future? Is that kind of what you're expecting in the next couple of weeks to months?
Yeah, I'd think so. In terms of there were various kind of options in that, but time's just getting on, and where we've got to now, I don't see any other option. If you look at kind of, I don't know if they snookered themselves with what happened last season or not, but in our league, Malden and Tiptree were pretty much there. I think maybe 2 or 3 games away from having it confirmed, and it got null and voided. So they've almost set the precedent. I don't see how they'd get out of this season when I think Bury have only played 4 games in our league. So, for me, I think so. And I think, with this last winter survival kind of grant coming out, I think that sets the tone a little bit. So I think, that's the way I would see it going. And, everyone can kind of draw that line and crack on with planning for next season, hopefully.
How do you feel, I guess, about the, not perception is probably the wrong word, but I guess how this publicity or the storytelling around this situation in non-league has been, because it only seems really to have been mentioned, certainly from my perspective, looking at the outside, when let's say a Marine play Tottenham in the FA Cup and they want those non-league stories, but beyond that it seems to have been relatively quiet. Is that frustrating for, I guess the question for both of you, is it frustrating for you both, given the good work and we've spoken about community and how you get your finances right? Is it frustrating, perhaps, the lack of publicity you get at this level?
Yeah, I think so. I think we're lucky in Norfolk to an extent. I think Norfolk is very much a Norwich City, Kings Lynn, and then everyone else. And that's one of the things we've got to work really hard to change that perception. So again, Ben and Jordan and the media lads have been huge for that. And the setup off the field, we've got to push ourselves into that next level and move on. Whether it's Nick Bowler, local report and stuff, we are well supported. The time that was really frustrating, as I said, when we were the only side not playing, that's the first time I think during any of it that really got to me. And it wasn't because we weren't playing, it was because we were the only ones not playing. And I couldn't quite kind of get my head around that personally. So that was a tough time for us. And I think that was for everyone. Even down to the players, we had some really difficult questions where there was the potential that players could then go and play for a step 5 side, or it's like, what does that look like? And as Ben's mentioned, all those variables, that was one that we never thought we'd encounter, where we're the only team not playing. It's been tough, but as I said, it's the variables, and every business, individuals, families are all going through it at the moment, and we're no different to anyone else. So it's our duty to get our house in order and make the best of it.
Yeah, I was going to say, just what Ash said. Basically that. I think that for us, it's more about actually kind of not dwelling on it too much, if I'm honest, Connor, in the sense of, okay, look, we can't do much with this, but all we can then do is kind of take it on the chin and then just focus on next season and focus on what the outcome is. Because like Ash said, obviously we you can take it so personally, but it's about actually just, okay, that's happened, it's knocked us, but we'll get up and just kind of just get on again and just carry on. It's one of those things. I'm always a bit of a believer in. These things are sent to test us in some ways, just to kind of work out what our resilience is, so that we can just kind of, okay, that's fine, that's happened, right, just shed it and just move on. Otherwise it could just eat us up, really. So
it's interesting you say that. I saw a quote. It's quite a deep quote, actually. I saw a quote the other day that said, "Don't trip over things that are behind you," which was quite interesting. And maybe that's the way to look at it. Gents, I think that just about wraps it up. Thank you very much for joining me. Thank you all very much for watching. We're hoping to do these a bit more frequently, especially over the period that we're all in, to try and get you feel a little bit closer to Dereham at this moment in time, where we're not able to all meet together at Oldest Park and whatnot, or watch Dereham. And that is such a shame at the moment, because it is such a void, I think, in everyone's life. And albeit we get to watch these games on TV, they don't feel the same, and it is difficult. So fingers crossed we're in a much better place in a few months' time, and we can begin to explore those possibilities again. Ash, Ben, thank you very much. Thank you all very much. Stay safe, and we'll see you all again very, very soon.